Nope.
What did you think?
I just think it is so neat that Madge wrote a poem. When she emailed me a poem draft here a few weeks ago, I was so excited about that. I thought, how neat, how very talented she is. She does art on so many levels, and I just admire her greatly. And I just think that I'm so glad that you read that tonight. I'm going to start off here with some new things since I last saw you a couple months ago. Since then, I talked about this a little bit when I saw you before, I did a little 4-week mini poetry class at the college, and Faith Bemis was in there, and Faye Mays, and Marianne Bedwell, and a couple new ladies from Cole Camp that we met and who were going to be here tonight, but one of them, the one who was going to read, got sick, and so Jean Heelan, I hope, will be reading for us another time. They're very interested in poetry and in joining our group, so I think they'll be coming around when they can. So I was excited about that. Also, Judy Woolery, a good friend of mine, was in the class. We just had a great time, and we called it The Poem and You, and we can do it again sometime, and maybe some other people will be interested in getting together and just kind of exploring what poetry is and looking back there in your mind. Everybody has poetry. It's just a matter of bringing it up and out, and we had a good time doing that. So these are some things that I wrote with the class, kind of related to activities that we did, and one of the things that we talked about was the plight or situation of the poet, and we looked at the Lawrence Ferlinghetti poem, Constantly Risking Absurdity, which uses the metaphor of a poet as a high wire walker who is always risking absurdity and death, literally, in that vicarious position. It's about vulnerability and about how when you write poems, when you do art, you put yourself out there, and it's a vulnerable spot to be in sometimes because you don't know how it's going to be received, how it's going to be taken, and it takes a lot of courage. So I was thinking about that poem, and this is just a little poem along the same lines. It's called The Intersection. At a certain spot on every road, the poet comes to a 4-way stop, where words and thoughts wait left and right, where readers sit across the way, where for the longest moment no one moved. Finally, he inches forth, watching everywhere at once, lets up the brake, coasts, and knows his chance of being hit is great. And then this next piece, I threw out some prompts, just some single word prompts for students, and this one was the word eggs. I said, what can you do with that? Eggs. And so they came back next week, and everybody had an egg poem. And this is my poem called Gathering Eggs. It's a nostalgia poem. It's a poem about when I was a little girl, and I never knew my grandmother very well. She died when I was 9. But this is something that I remember and some feelings that I have about an experience that I shared with her. It's called Gathering Eggs. Instead of this fuzzy, unfocused picture in my mind, I wish the image captured Grandma's bright eyes and warm bosom, that I didn't have to squint to see that one trip out to the chicken house where she took me to gather eggs. If I try hard enough, I can still see her fingers, long and white, shiny and slim and slick, as they slid under brooding hens who squawked at the marauding, flapping clouds of dust from the straw, while I ran off, afraid. This is my one surviving picture, except for the home movie shot in slow motion a little later, where frame by frame I watched her disappear over months beneath a shroud of pink Chanel. I wish I had waited by those nests, studied the slant of sunlight, sifted straw through my fingers, felt in my face the frantic wind of wings, learned more about the comfort of eggs still warm. Thank you. And then one of the most enjoyable and weirdest things that we did in the class, I found a book. It's a book that I used back when I was teaching for real, a Michael Smith book called Dangerous Poetry, Writing Dangerous Poetry or something like that. And it's based on the premise that we all write in a comfort zone of sorts and don't branch out beyond that sometimes. So he had this little instrument in the book that we could take, answer these questions, and what you get is a poetic temperament profile out of that. And what he recommends that you do is write on the other side of the circle, write the things that you're not familiar with. My writing profile placed me as a feeling writer, and so this is putting me into more of a thinking mode. So this is called Sonnet for Robin. I'll read it for you and see what you think about this one. He was a genius, everyone agreed. A world where hot and cold would oft collide, where instability would often feed the warm and humid space inside his mind, where for a time the wind would blow one way, would change direction suddenly, and then, with every different character he played, would twist into a counterclockwise spin. That final violent thunderstorm was one he couldn't weather, blinded by the rain. And when the up and down drafts were all done, the wind shear bore him up and then away. He never saw the tragic aftermath his stormy genius scattered in its path. And of course, that's a sonnet about Robin Williams. The activity that Michael Smith recommended for me to try, he said, pick some kind of weather and use it as a metaphor for something. And so that's what I did with this one. So that was Sonnet for Robin. And those were the three of the things that I wrote along with the students in the poem and you. Then this other one, this is like Mike had his obligatory Christmas piece. This is not really a Christmas piece, but it is about gifts. And I share it tonight just because it's kind of different from what I usually write. And I don't know, it just occurred to me maybe within the last week, 10 days. I remember when I first retired, people say, well, what's it like? And I said, at the time, it's like every day I wake up and someone hands me a gift and I unwrap it and it's a day. It's a day that I have, just for me, that I can do anything I want to do. And at that time, I really felt that was what I had. So this is kind of where this comes from. I think the same sentiment called gifts. If days were wrapped in paper and sealed up with a star, then maybe we would understand just what a gift they are. If days were bound with ribbon and tied up with a bow, then maybe just a hint of what our finite minds can't know would pour out on our senses, would give us sweet rebirth, and maybe we would cherish more our days upon this earth. I think it's hard sometimes to cherish those days in the Christmas season. It is for me. It's frantic, and I don't enjoy it. I've told you that before, last Christmas. So I have to remember things like this, I think, this time of year, and I think we all can when we're, amid the frantic nature of the Christmas season. Just remember that when you wake up in the morning, it's like unwrapping a gift. So that's all I have for now. If we want to do more later, we can, but I'll end for now, give the floor to Doug, and thank you very much. And I complimented Madge before on the many things that she does in the arts, but my goodness, these last 3.5 years of Spofest have been just a pleasure in terms of the people that we've been able to bring together. I really love this group and this event, and all of you are special. And the ones that aren't with us tonight are special. And I just thank you, James, for having the courage to step out and try to do this. I'll admit, the first time James called me, says, "Well, do you think something like this would go?" I'm going, let's try. And so I'm glad that he did. I'm glad that he took that step of faith, and admire him very much. Admire all of you very much. Last time I was here, I was reading from a manuscript that I had of a poetry collection I was going to publish. Well, it's out and can be yours, but I'm just going to read a couple things real quick here from it. Maybe three. Most of my things are short. I'm going to do this one called Secrets. I've only read this in public one other time, and it's an experience that goes back to when Gary and I lived on an old farm out by Boehner, and I don't think Gary even knows about this experience that I built this poem on. I know he's nervous, but it's not really. It's called Secrets, and see what you think. When the kitten's back had a wet, gaping hole, I first blamed inbreeding, too many litters, or just stupid fate for this sick freak of nature, too weak to survive, too alive to die. Just after dawn, while the kids still slept, I placed the kitten inside a small shoebox, hurried along to a pasture shed, set it in a dirt corner no sunlight could find. I barely discerned the slight shift of weight, hardly heard the tiny scratch. I pass there today and don't see the farmhouse, don't notice the yard where my children played, but rather imagine the ghost of a kitten rising toward me as secrets ooze out. And then this is kind of Mike was talking about old hippies a while ago, and so I have an old hippie poem too. I wrote this one time when Gary and I and some friends were in Hawaii, called Old Hippie on a Beach in Maui. Thin gray wisps rubber banded at his neck, he stands at the water's edge near the majestic black rock of Kanapali and salutes the sun. He thinks how the years have ebbed and flowed since Woodstock, how back home he traded faded flowered cargoes for suit and tie, starched shirt and wingtips to pedal vacuums and used cars. How it is almost time to put flags at the feet of his dad and grandpa, and roses at the head of his mom, who cried the whole time he stayed in Canada. His shoulders sag with the gravity of hours and minutes, of love that was not, after all, free. And he watches water fill the prints his skinny white feet carve into this moment. And one more, called Where Deer Run. And I apologize if I've read this at a Spofest before, long ago, I might have. But I used to tell my students when I was a real teacher and I had a class, I say, well, you never have a wasted day. If you see a deer, because that's always such a surprise and such a neat thing, unless, of course, you're seeing it a little too close to your car. Or if you write a poem. If you write a poem, then your day has been great. So this kind of comes from that philosophy. It's called Where Deer Run. And it's a good way for me to end, I think, my session tonight, because it kind of explains toward the end my philosophy of writing poetry and how poetry works. So Where Deer Run, my last thing. A day is never wasted, I tell my students, if you see a deer or write a poem. One ties you to the world of nature, and the other to a place beyond. Both are spontaneous, unforeseen, beautiful. Whether it be a doe's easy stride over some imposing fence, or the leap words and rhythm make together over another arbitrary boundary. Keep watch, I tell them. Listen to the words that leap and play into your head. Rub them between your fingers. Inhale them. Let them melt on your tongue like snowflakes that fall in the wild, quiet world where deer always run.